Welcome back to Totally Unbiased. You know what it is. Every week we got you here on the fantasy side. No Aiden, no Andrew, but I got a couple of co-hosts today. Good friends of mine, Ryan and Rob. How are we doing this afternoon, this evening, I shall
Doing
say?
pretty good. I'm glad to be here.
Pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Of course. All right, so the fantasy side, if you guys are new to the channel, anybody, fantasy side, we kind of just talk about some certain players who have questions. Maybe you don't know whether they should be in your lineup. Whether you should pick them up, whatever it might be. We got some guys that we want to talk about, and they're the more intriguing names of fantasy football so far this year. So I think Rob, in preparation for this show, his first guy he wants to talk about is probably the most intriguing storyline of this entire fantasy season. Rob, take it away.
Corderelle Patterson. I know he saved a bunch of your fantasy leagues. He saved mine for sure. I did not have a running back too, and he saved my life. But honestly, I think he's going to continue to keep up his production. A lot of people think he's going to fall off. I don't. I see him being one of the top PPR backs. I mean, you look at Matt Ryan, he's getting up there in age. He doesn't have the arm strength he used to. It looks like Patterson's his main check down, and he's going to be checking down a lot. He doesn't want to get hit. He wants to let go of that ball quicker. You know, Ridley's on and off. He's going to be injured, or he is injured currently. So I see Patterson continuing to rise, and I don't think he's going to fall off. He's a running back that's a wide receiver, and that's perfect for a PPR back.
Ryan, as a fantasy owner of Patterson, how do you feel about him?
I feel great. I picked him up 3 weeks ago in all my leagues before, he was the main claim to fame for a lot of fantasy owners, and I've just been very happy with him. He's the third-ranked fantasy running back right now, and honestly, he's producing very well. There's a lot of question about if he can continue this consistency, and I think he can. Like Rob was saying, he's the main guy for Matt Ryan. He's getting like 14 to 15 carries a game, but he's really being used in that passing game, and I think that's where he's going to be extremely effective, especially in a lot of leagues.
Yeah, Patterson's really interesting. As somebody who has like this, I have this theory, and my fantasy football theory is kind of two great performances in a row, you're startable, and three in a row, you're solidified. And for me, Patterson is solidified. Fantasy season is not a long one. It's not. And frankly, production at the running back position is huge, especially this year when you have guys who are A, either underperforming or B, injured. Dalvin Cook, Saquon Barkley, those huge players. Christian McCaffrey, again, those huge players who are underperforming. The value of Corderelle Patterson is massive. And I think if you were smart enough to pick him up when you did, you're really happy right now. You're really, really happy. And, what he is kind of something that another one of these guys that we wanted to talk about is not. Ryan wrote this guy's name down, and surprisingly, after years and years of quarterback-proof performances, Allen Robinson is just atrocious so far. Ryan, what's going on with him?
He's honestly, I've been very disappointed. He's like through many quarterbacks, in his career, he's put up 1,000-yard, 1,100-yard seasons. He's been very starter proof, but this year has just been bad. His best game was against Cincinnati. He caught 2 passes, 10 targets, 1 touchdown. He's not being targeted so much, and I think a lot of the reason is because the quarterback. I think starting Justin Fields is not a great move in terms of getting Allen Robinson to produce what he can produce. And I think a lot of fantasy managers in fantasy football are very disappointed because we all know what Allen Robinson can do. He's not injured. He didn't take a step back. He's a very talented receiver, both in the short and deep threat. And I honestly hope his team can get it out of this slump and he can start producing. But I don't know if he can.
Yeah, Rob, what's going on with Robinson?
I think other guys are stepping up. You see Darnell Mooney's been having a pretty good year. He had a great year at the end of the season last year. Starting Justin Fields, isn't helping Allen Robinson's fantasy stock, but it's definitely the right move for the Bears organization. So I think Fields starting definitely takes away targets for Robinson. And we look before David Montgomery got hurt, he was playing very well. He was leading the league, or maybe second in rushing, I believe, before he got hurt. So I just think it's not the reasoning that Allen Robinson's declining, and talent. I think it's more that other guys are just stepping up.
Yeah, other guys definitely are stepping up. You mentioned Darnell Mooney. They seem to have a fascination with Cole Kmet. They keep trying to get him the ball. That fascination, in my opinion, has not worked out yet. It's not really come to fruition. But I gotta say, it's important to remember that the Bears, they haven't been this explosive offense that they were supposed to be. And their most productive years came with Mitchell Trubisky, and that's saying something about Matt Nagy. So I think the best thing fantasy managers can hope for is a trade out of this team. And right now they're afloat, but if they start losing games, look for him to be moved. And there are some wide receiver needy teams, especially in a guy who's on the franchise tag. And he didn't sign a long-term deal for this exact reason. He doesn't trust the franchise. He doesn't trust the coaching staff. There's a chance he's moved. I don't really have destinations off the top of my head, but there's some wide receiver needy teams in the league, and Allen Robinson could definitely fit someone's need. And I think a big part about, like we mentioned quarterback play. So I'm gonna flip to a different quarterback, and someone I want to talk about is Jalen Hurts. So it's weird, like Jalen Hurts. I still can't say whether he's the franchise quarterback of the Eagles. We don't know. He's been a little uneven. He hasn't been, he's been really good and really bad. He doesn't wake up or show up until the fourth quarter, which is concerning for me, franchise-wise. But, I mean, fantasy football, this guy's a beast. He's had 20 points in every game. So it's hard for me to differentiate franchise quarterback from fantasy quarterback greatness. And I don't think he's a franchise quarterback. However, fantasy-wise, he's extremely relevant. And you have a lot of people based off of his eye test who are undervaluing him. So if you have an opportunity to go get Jalen Hurts, I think you should do it. And Ryan, as somebody who was once an owner of Jalen Hurts, how have you evaluated his starts to games this year? Because they've been pretty putrid.
I think a lot of people who start him aren't having any problems. I think, like you said, he's a great talent. I don't know if it's too early to tell, in my opinion, if he is a quarterback for the Eagles. I think he's just fitting well in that offense, but I think his ability to run also gives him an edge over his competitors. I think that he's connecting well with a lot of players in that offense, like Raygor and the guy they picked for first round this year. I can't think of his name right now. Yeah, Devontae Smith. I think his connection to Devontae Smith is really well, especially in the end zone. And I just think he's a talented quarterback, and I like to see what the kid can do for the rest of the season.
Yeah, Rob, tell me what your analysis on Jalen Hurts. Because I mentioned before, he's starting slow in these games, yet he's ending with the production. So what do you attribute that to?
From the time he got drafted, I believed in this kid. I thought he was one of the sleeper quarterbacks of the draft. I mean, if you guys watched the game last week, there was one play where Dallas Goedert had a walk-in touchdown. Nobody covering him. A ball was right in his hands. He couldn't even catch it. So I think a lot of the fault with Jalen Hurts is the receivers. He's throwing to Quez Watkins. He's throwing to Jalen Raygor. His best target is Devontae Smith, who's a rookie. Guys like Dallas Goedert are dropping wide open passes. Yes, he does have a sustainable O-line, but they're also old. So for the fantasy side of it, he's definitely going to be a good fantasy quarterback. I mean, he's a runner of a football. He's going to get you those points just because he's going to run in those touchdowns. But honestly, I think there shouldn't be a concern for Jalen Hurts other than the fact that he does need to improve his deep ball accuracy. And like you guys said, he needs to show up in the first half of games because he's a second half player.
Yeah, he had 2 points. For anybody that doesn't understand, he had 2.94 until I think midway through the third quarter, and he ended with 21. So that's interesting. And they ended up winning the game. Good for the Eagles. But, we talk about a good floor, and I think his floor is 20 points. And somebody that Ryan wrote down for the show, Darrell Henderson, has had a floor of 16 points, and he seems to be pretty consistent so far this year. Ryan, take it away.
Yeah, I really value consistency, and especially for fantasy football in a league where running backs are utilized and consistency is key. I think Darrell Henderson is a solid running back too. He's getting 15 to 17 attempts a game. He's getting 80, 90 yards and a touchdown. He's even being utilized in the passing game, which in a Rams offense is pretty rare. You see guys like Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, Jefferson, even Deshaun Jackson was catching passes. And I think the fact that McVay is built an offense around running backs, and especially in a system where Henderson can thrive, I think it's going to be a good season for him.
Yeah, Rob, what do you take about Henderson's performance and his volume so far this year?
No, Henderson is definitely going to be a good running back down the line for fantasy owners. I mean, as Ryan said, you'd never see a Rams running back catching the ball out of the backfield. So seeing Henderson getting touches like that is definitely a bright spot for fantasy owners. With Cam Akers torn ACL out for the year, there's not much competition in that backfield. So I would ride with him till the end of the year.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And now we're going to talk, because Henderson was kind of this – he was kind of this guy who was thrust into this role because of Cam Akers being, down. And a receiver that has a lot of his counterparts in his offense down, Kadarius Toney. And, the next two guys we're going to talk about are waiver pickups. And I hope you guys were ahead of the curve on Kadarius Toney. If you, watched any of our stuff, if you've seen our TikTok, we told you 2 weeks ago, before the Saints game, go get Kadarius Toney. Now, it was a low risk, high reward scenario. Now, I personally think Kadarius Toney is in for a potential breakout year. And there's a couple reasons why. Number one is the health of the Giants offense. There is none. Like, the health of the Giants offense is atrocious. They have injury-prone players everywhere. And it seemed like already, I think Kadarius Toney has edged out Darius Slayton, and it was only a matter of time. Darius Slayton has been ineffective, frankly, for the Giants. And Kadarius Toney eats targets. We saw him get 20 catches in the last 2 weeks, I believe. 19 catches on 20-something targets. It's excellent so far for him and for the Giants. They have a young playmaker. Now, the reason I feel Kadarius Toney is somebody who's super relevant is the fact that the Giants might see him, and by the Giants, I mean Jason Garrett, Joe Judge, Dave Gettleman, as a way to save their job because they're at a turbulent season. It's 1-4, and this kid is a superstar so far. He looks great. I mean, what he does after the catch is something I have not seen in a long time. He has eyes in the back of his head. He teleports through space, and if his volume stays the way it is, with Kenny Golladay being constantly injured, Shepard and Slayton have been out. Shepard's coming back. I think with these two, and with Barkley now hitting the shelf because he's injured, Kadarius Toney could see a lot of snaps, a lot of touches, and he's a guy who can be used in gimmicks. He's going to throw the ball. Kadarius Toney will throw the ball. He's going to run the ball. He'll be in Wildcat. I really think he's somebody that you should look at starting at your flex based off this week's performance. Watch what he does. If he plays well, I say start him at your flex because I think he might be a guy you should be really interested in. Ryan, what do you think about Kadarius Toney so far?
I honestly agree with you. As a Giants fan watching these games, it's tough to see players, make mistakes. And one guy who I think is having a breakout season and will continue to have one is Kadarius Toney. Last game against Dallas, he had 10 targets. He had 180 yards. Before that, he put up 78 yards against the Saints. His first 2 weeks weren't great, but that's because he was getting fit into the offense. I don't think it's a question of if Toney can do it, if he can produce numbers. I think it's a question of how are Jason Garrett, Joe Judge, and Gettleman going to utilize him moving forward? Like, are they actually going to put him into this role where he's just producing his high volume every game? He's going to be working around the offense, especially with so many guys that are injured. And even your starting quarterback, Daniel Jones, he's on concussion protocol. But I think it's a question of can he be used to that full level? And I really hope the Giants don't fumble the bag with this one.
Yeah, Rob, what's your thoughts on Kadarius the last couple weeks?
Honestly, last week he was real impressive. The guy's got the talent. He's got the speed. My biggest question is that the Giants are very injured, and Daniel Jones is not the quarterback right now. And Daniel Jones has played very well, and I think Kadarius Toney will really benefit from having him as the starting quarterback. Also, Saquon Barkley is going to come back. Second half is where Toney got most of his production last week, and Saquon is going to come back and want his touches. So it's a matter of how they're going to spread that ball around. We got to remember Kenny Golladay didn't play last week. The Giants have a lot of weapons, so Tony's definitely got the talent, but I don't know how much volume he's going to get down the line.
Yeah, volume is a big question, and Tony's the guy you should be picking up off waivers. Rob, tell me about this other guy you got written down here, because besides deep fantasy guys like us, who analyze everything, not a lot of people know who this guy is. Tell us about him.
Arma St Brown. Okay, so the Lions just lost their rookie receiver Quintez Cephas to a torn ACL last week. This guy, Arma St. Brown, has gotten 8 targets his last 2 games. He's put up 13 fantasy points, and he hasn't scored a touchdown yet. He looks like Jared Goff's favorite target, maybe alongside TJ Hawkinson. So I'm going to say I would go pick him up now. He seems like a guy like Kenny Golladay years back when nobody knew his name. The Lions weren't a great team back then. They're not a great team now. Just looks like somebody who could come out the blue and save your fantasy season. So go pick them up before somebody else gets them.
Yeah, Ryan, have you heard of Arma St. Brown besides from maybe fantasy experts around? Have you watched the Lions game and seen him so far?
I've seen him a few times, I'll be honest. I knew about him when they drafted him, like the name. I saw a couple highlights, but I didn't think anything of it. This is a guy they got in the 4th round in the 2021 draft. And I think that Jared Goff is looking to throw to new guys. It's the Detroit offense. It's nothing to be super excited about. But I think with him throwing to Hawkinson and with Quintez Cephas out, St. Brown can definitely step up and produce, even score touchdowns.
Yeah, St. Brown was somebody I had on my list of sleepers to start the season. Unfortunately, as the ebbs and flow of the season goes, he wasn't able to stay on my roster. That might bite me later, but that's quite all right. So that's really it. That's all we really got to talk about for this episode of the fantasy side. Go to your waivers. Go get St. Brown. Don't mess around. Don't be like me. Don't let him just go. All right. If you have a chance to go get Cadarius Toney, do it. If you can go pick him up, I wouldn't trade for him. But I would go pick him up if he's available. Allen Robinson, like we mentioned before, tough year. I think really his value will come down the line if they trade him. Darrell Henderson, consistent floor, and Corderelle Patterson is the guy we never knew we needed. I mean, 8 years in the league, 9 years in the league, he's just being utilized now. I really want to thank Rob and Ryan for coming on to the show. I have my co-hosts are just gone. I don't know where they went. So I thank you guys for coming on. I would love to have you guys on again, and I'm sure they'll be seeing you guys soon enough. Remember, follow our social medias. YouTube is totally unbiased. Our Twitter is YT_unbiased. TikTok and Instagram are at totally unbiased. No spaces, no periods, no underscores. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you.